Okay. Okay. So I wanted to. I'm wearing. Not sure you can see it. Yeah. Uh, Number 101 today. Amount of days, a number of days, hostages have been held in Gaza. By the way, I don't know if you saw this. If you saw, you would only have seen it on Times of Israel, I think. I don't think New York Times reported this. An Israeli soccer player who plays for one of the professional teams in Turkey, after he scored a goal yesterday, um, for the camera, made a heart like this, like a lot of people make a heart, see? And on his wristband, he had the number 100 on it, a Star of David, and October 7th. And so he showed that into the camera. He was arrested by Turkish authorities. Israel had to intervene, and now he's being deported to Israel. So, and of course, Israel has protested this. The foreign ministry has made statements about how this was awful that the Turkish government would have done something like that. And it just shows how the plight of the hostages is grave, and that the world has forgotten about the hostages. And if it's not for the United States working behind the scenes with Israel, and also the hostage families themselves, then nothing would be done for them. So we pray for their release. I wanted to talk today about an article that appeared in the New York Times yesterday on the online edition. I don't think it was in the paper, but it was on the online edition. And I want to share my, because this article has something to do with this whole Israel-Hamas war. So I'm going to share my screen, and here we go. So, like I said, this was on the digital version of New York Times yesterday. Is Israel part of what it means to be Jewish? Okay, so is Israel part of what it means to be Jewish? So as the subheadline says, some progressive Jews are embracing diasporism, reimagining their faith as one that blesses their lives in America and elsewhere. So the idea is, and we'll read the article together, that the idea is, do you have to be considered Jewish? Do you have to believe in Israel? So, and I leave Israel kind of open-ended like that because can you is it the state of Israel? Is it the land of Israel? Or is it the people of Israel? So what does it mean to be Jewish? And can you be Jewish without supporting or being dedicated to the land of Israel or the state of Israel? So before I get to the article, I want to just kind of highlight this, that a traditional definition of Judaism. I need to get a piece of paper to show this. The traditional definition of Judaism incorporates a triangle. There you can see it. Okay, so you can picture Judaism as a triangle, and let me write what is on each point of the triangle. Okay, so to explain Judaism, Yeah, because of my screen behind me, so you can't. Just a second here. Okay, maybe a little bit. So the top is God. On the bottom 2 points are Torah and Israel. So Judaism traditionally, classically, is pictured as a triangle with God, Torah, and Israel on each part of the triangle, and it's an interrelationship between all three parts. You can't classically define Judaism without those three concepts. Okay, so God, Torah, and Israel. As the Torah itself explained, and as the rabbis interpreted, God chose the land of Israel to be the homeland of the people of Israel, who, while living in Israel, would be fulfilling the covenant between the people of Israel and God as written in the Torah. Okay, so that long sentence is the foundation of what Judaism is. God chose the land of Israel to be the homeland of the people of Israel, where they will fulfill the covenant as written in the Torah. Okay? So everything else is all fluff added to that, but that's essentially what Judaism is. Now, this article is going to be talking about this new wave of so-called diasporism, but it's not new. So for centuries, if not millennia, the people of Israel have existed with that picture of the triangle defining who they are. Okay? And so wherever we have lived, we have, especially when we have lived outside the land of Israel, we have always hoped and prayed for a return to Israel. 3 times a day, we pray to return to Israel. We pray for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. We pray for God to bring the Messiah, to bring us back to Israel. Okay? So wherever we are in the world, that's what we do. And that's what we have done. And our prayer book today in 2024 still has prayers about Israel. Okay, so, however, 200 years ago or so, when the ghetto walls were broken down by Napoleon, and when he allowed the Jews of France to become citizens of France, that you have then Judaism or the Jews defining their Judaism differently. And there were those who then started what became Reform Judaism. And the main feature of Reform Judaism was classical Reform Judaism from 200 years ago, was to take away the land of Israel part of the triangle, and to highlight instead how great it is to be a citizen of France, and to say that we can be Jewish and French at the same time, and we will not pray for a return to the land of Israel, and we will not pray for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem, because we don't want to show or to have our fellow Frenchmen believe that we are not truly French. We want to be considered truly French, so we will take away that those parts of the liturgy and of our ideology that has anything to do with an association with the land of Israel. So that's classical reform. And when reform then spread to Germany, same thing. And when it came to America in the middle 1800s, again, classical reform, same thing. Classical reform is, I wouldn't say it's anti-Israel, it's just non-Israel. That's not what Reform Judaism was about. So this article that came out yesterday makes it seem like this is a new trend, but it's not new. And there are other kinds of trends or denominations or groups within the greater Jewish community that take away different parts of the points of the triangle. There are so-called humanistic Jews who are who do not believe in God at all, because humanism is atheism. But they claim to be Jewish because there are cultural practices that they will still do that are, they claim, uniquely Jewish. So they have the people of Israel, they have Torah, but not as a book commanded by God to the people of Israel, but rather Torah containing the cultural practices. And like I said, classical Reform Judaism takes the land of Israel part away from the point of the triangle. And you could argue also that Reform Judaism takes Torah away from the triangle, and that it's not the classical traditional understanding of a text taught by God to the people of Israel, but rather an oral tradition passed down over time. So there have been different denominations over time that kind of bend our understanding of the different points of the triangle of God, Torah, and Israel. Okay, so now let's take a look at this article by Mark Tracy. Last month on the first night of Hanukkah, oh, and of course, feel free to interrupt with a question or comment as we go. Last month on the first night of Hanukkah, more than 200 people packed an old ballroom on the third floor of a restored synagogue in Brooklyn. A few came fresh off the subway from a protest in Manhattan that was organized by left-wing Jewish groups calling for a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. They were there to hear from Shaul Magid, whose long, thin, white beard and shaved head made him look more like a roadie than a rabbi. This is what he looks like, okay? A professor of Jewish studies at Dartmouth, as well as a rabbi, Mr. Magid, was there to spread the message elucidated in a new book, The Necessity of Exile, that Jews today outside Israel, 75% of whom live in the United States, should embrace diaspora, the state of living outside a homeland, as a permanent and valuable condition. Okay, so before I go on, let me just explain a couple of points. So, first of all, Jews outside of the land of Israel, right? So the ideal has always been to live in Israel. And if we pray 3 times a day for going back to Israel, even before the state of Israel existed in 1948, there were people over the generations who made the trip to Israel, not just to visit, but to live and to fulfill the mitzvah of living in Israel. Clearly a mitzvah from the Talmud that Jewish life is elevated when lived in Israel to an extent that it can't be elevated in any place else. Okay, so there is a value to making Aliyah, going up to Israel and living there. Okay, not just visiting, but living in Israel permanently. That is a mitzvah, something to aspire to. So that throughout the generations has been a goal. So since the temple was destroyed, uh, there is there is we have been living in exile. So the Romans sent the Jews into exile. The question then is, over the centuries, are we living in exile or are we living in diaspora? And the difference is in spiritual perspective. For traditional Jews, Orthodox Jews, we are living, when we don't live in Israel, we are living in exile. This was before 1948. Since 1948, with the establishment of the State of Israel, there is still a debate. Are we still living in exile, even though the State of Israel exists? So exile for a traditional ultra-Orthodox Jew is that condition in which we are forced out of the land of Israel by God, because according to the very traditional ultra-Orthodox, God used the Romans as a tool to destroy the temple as punishment for Israel's sins. And until the Messiah comes, brings the people of Israel back to Israel and rebuilds the temple, we are in exile. So for some in the ultra-Orthodox community, we're still in exile, even though the State of Israel has been reestablished. Okay? So there's that idea that outside of Israel, we're living in exile because it's a spiritual perspective, as opposed to a geographic perspective, we're in diaspora. We're spread apart, spread around the world from forces, because of forces not by God, but by other military political forces. So therefore, there's no spiritual component by where we're living. It's just the way it is. How did the Jews end up in America, Jews in Europe, et cetera, et cetera? It's the diaspora. So God didn't cause the diaspora to happen. We're living in diaspora. This also comes to light when I still remember this, taking a modern Jewish history class in rabbinical school taught by Dr. Wertheimer. And he started the class by saying, when does modern Jewish history begin? So it's an interesting question. So it depends on your perspective vis-a-vis Israel. So Israeli Jewish historians would argue that modern Jewish history began as medieval history ends, modern Jewish history begins at the Khmelnytsky pogroms. In the 1600s, those pogroms then caused an intellectual change in the Jewish community to begin to think about a place to go that would be a refuge from the ongoing persecution and slaughter in Europe. And so it's after the 1600s that modern Jewish historians see as a shift, and that people started to think about moving to Israel and creating a homeland in Israel. So for Israeli modern Jewish historians, modern Jewish history begins when people start thinking about moving to Israel. Whereas outside of Israel, modern Jewish historians, that is, historians of modern Jewish history, think that modern Jewish history begins in 1789. And 1789 is the French Revolution, when, as a result of the French Revolution 15 years later, Napoleon grants citizenship to the Jews. So the status of the Jew in the world changes to become a full citizen, and how that has then affected the status of Jews in the world. So you see that even for historians of modern Jewish history, the Israel plays an important part in determining when the period of modern Jewish history begins. And if you're an Israeli modern Jewish historian, you think in terms of Israel. And if you're a diaspora or exile modern Jewish historian, you think in terms of where you're living outside of Israel in your diaspora and the place of the Jew in the country that you're living. Okay, so since 1789, the question of the Jews' relationship with Israel has always been a question, and it's there within the denominations, and it's there in the academic world as well. Okay, so the article goes on. If there's a diasporic reality where Jews have been able to live as Jews, flourish as Jews, not to be oppressed and persecuted, whether they choose to be a Satmar Chassid or Larry David, the comedian, it doesn't matter. If they're allowed to live the Judaism they want, why would that be a tragedy, he said. So, in other words, Shaul Magid, in his book and in his life, in his teachings, is talking about the beauty of, or the blessing of, diaspora Judaism. How Judaism can flourish independent of Israel. Mr. Magid's outlook is one of several burgeoning visions for the future of Jewish life that fall under the umbrella of diasporism. The idea has been getting a new look since Hamas's horrific attack on Israel 3 months ago, and Israel's pulverizing bombing campaign and invasion in Gaza. Those events have forced Jews everywhere to reckon anew with what they think about Israel and the central role it plays in Jewish life, the kind of charged moment when members of spiritual communities can ask themselves what really matters and sometimes reach radically different conclusions. So in other words, here in America, there could be a growing movement, this journalist is suggesting, of Jews saying, we don't need Israel. And in fact, State of Israel's policies right now are such that it's not endearing us to Israel. Therefore, we won't show any kind of connection to Israel anymore, and just instead show a connection to our Jewish community here in America and allow Jews to thrive here without needing a connection to Israel. Okay? Now, I'm not here to denigrate this opinion. I'm not here to say that they're wrong. I'm just here to bring this up to say that this is interesting, and it's tragic, in my opinion, that Jews would think that Judaism can thrive and the Jewish community can thrive without a relationship in some regard to the land of Israel and the state of Israel. Okay, let's read a little bit more and I'll comment more about that. Some versions of diasporism are secular, often hearkening back to the unreligious, anti-Zionist Jewish labor Bund that arose in late 19th century Eastern Europe, the same time and place where political Zionism was born, to agitate for Jewish rights in the European empires of the day. The Bund's slogan of Deutkeit, a Yiddish word that roughly means here-ness, has been adopted by younger left-wing Jews. So, the Reform Judaism as a religious denomination of Judaism was anti-Zionist, saying, making the claim religiously for not needing Israel anymore. And there are secular Jews going back to the 1800s who are also anti-Zionist, saying, no, let's fight for our rights here instead of looking for an escape and a refuge someplace else. Better to fight for here than to fight for there. Okay, and you had that in America too. You had anti-Zionists in America in the Jewish world, and you had pro-Zionists. So that Herzl and the Zionist Congress caused a great debate and schism in the Jewish community at the time. So no, I don't know those percentages offhand. You'd have to look, Bob. I'm responding to what was in the chat from Bob about do I know how many people, American Jews, haven't been to Israel? Check the latest Pew study of the American Jewish community. If you just Google Pew American Jewish community, it'll have something there about Israel. And I don't know if it has something specifically about Jews who have traveled to Israel or just in general Jews feeling towards Israel. Okay, but it's there, and it was done, I think that was done in 2022, that the latest Pew study of the American Jewish community. Okay, so secular wise, there are Jews who say we need to fight for our rights here in the country that we're living. And religiously, there's also been a movement to separate religiously from Israel. So the article goes on. This socialist, secular, liberatory philosophy, said Molly Crabapple, an artist and writer working on the history of the Bund, whether it was the Bund or the larger world of Yiddish socialism, is deeply interwoven into our heritage and can provide a moral compass and help people reject exclusionary and violent ideologies. Can reject, okay, so the person is putting her own political perspective here about Israel's policy being exclusionary and violent. Okay, so in other words, one reason why perhaps Shaul Magid's diasporism and others who are promoting this diasporism is political, in that you can't stand what is, you have such abhorrence or just I can't fathom or digest is the state of Israel's policies, that it's better to make a clean break. So yes, so politically, there are many Jews in America who are starting to make that break from Israel, and I understand that they're doing it. I don't understand personally why they need to, but that's just me personally. But and we've talked about this before in Jews in the News a few weeks ago, just this growing trend. When I shared that letter that some alumni of the Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School wrote to the administration, which was an anti-Israel screed, this is what this article is reflecting. What do these Jews, these young Jews and other Jews feel about Israel today, and that we don't need Israel in order to actualize ourselves as Jews. Okay, Saul.
Yeah, the whole connection with the Bund and the and Bolshevism and leadership in the socialists is the basis for anti-Semitism in the United States and a lot of other countries that have you know have supposed to have a political system where everybody's free.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else they would have, what the politicians during the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s would have picked on to get rid of the Jews if not for that connection. And you're correct that it's interwoven. But I mentioned this before that I was questioned when I was working. If we had a war with Israel, this was back in
Right,
'73,
right,
which side would you be on?
right.
So
Yeah,
how do you break off that?
right.
That you're an American.
Okay. So there are a couple of ways to answer that question, and I wanted to get to that in a little bit. So if you can hold on, Saul, let me read a little bit more in this article to see a little bit more of some points that are being brought up, and then I wanted to get to your point exactly how I think that maintaining that point on the triangle with a connection to the state of Israel and the land of Israel is still relevant and important. So hold on. So other flavors are religious, that is, of a dissociation from Israel. The Berkeley professor emeritus, Daniel Boyarin, has called the Babylonian Talmud the true Jewish homeland. So I skipped the dashes. So the Talmud itself is the Jewish homeland, not the land of Israel, but a book, and a book studied and edited in Babylonia, that is, a place outside of Israel. Zionism, at least at its most doctrinaire, insists a Jew can achieve total realization as a Jew only by living in Israel. Shlilat Hagolah, Hebrew for negation of the exile, was an early Zionist slogan, right? Exile is bad, Israel is ideal and the only place to be, right? So there's Zionism, and then there's pro-Zionism and active pro-Zionism to the point in which you are denigrating life outside of Israel, right? So often when in my times that I have visited in Israel, studied in Israel, Israelis would say to me, "What are you doing living outside of Israel? You should be living here. You can't live as a Jew anyplace else. You need to be living in Israel." And that's an attitude that a lot of Israelis have. It's an attitude that a lot of early Zionists and Zionists today have. This idea that not only is Israel primary, but the exile living outside of Israel is negative, is a negative experience, and it's negative on your life. Diasporism, by contrast, holds the inverse, that Jews must embrace marginality and a certain estrangement from Israel, the country, and perhaps even Israel, the place. Anybody who cares seriously about being a Jew, goes an epigraph to Mr. Magid's book, is in exile, and would be in exile even if that person were in Jerusalem. So now that's reflecting an idea of what Judaism is supposed to be and how best to live Judaism in Israel. And those who criticize the policies of state of Israel are saying that the government of the state of Israel is reflecting an exile kind of philosophy, and that Israel isn't truly Israel until Israel becomes a democracy open to all Jews and all people. So you take the liberal progressive perspective on what community life is supposed to be about, right? Freedom, racial justice, harmony, all of that. Not just that Jews are advocating against anti-Semitism, but Jews are advocating against all forms of hatred and bigotry. Jews are advocating for social justice. So that's what Jews are supposed to be doing in America, these progressive Jews are saying. And when Jews in Israel don't do that, then the Jews of Israel are denouncing Judaism, are going against Judaism, and are living kind of a life, an exile, spiritually, metaphorically kind of life. All right, you see what I'm saying here? So the idea of this diasporism is not just to promote life in America and how great life can be here, and to fight for racial justice and harmony, but the fact that we don't need a connection to the state of Israel or the land of Israel to inspire us to true and just living. And in fact, some of them would say the state of Israel, with its policies, what the army is doing now in Gaza, what it wanted to do with the judiciary and other policies like that, just makes it so that we don't want anything to do with it because it goes against our idea of spirituality and our religious uh, uh, form of life. Okay? So that diasporism is not just an independent kind of nice idea, but it can be seen as a political idea, an anti-Israel political idea. Okay? Now, there could be something to be said for promoting life here. The fact that Lenore and I thought about making Aliyah years ago. We didn't do it. And clearly, we see a value in having a Jewish life here in Olney, Maryland, and that we think that we could provide a Jewish life for our children. So, yes, in a way, I could be considered, and all of us who, as Jews, live in America are diaspora Jews. However, I also think that it is essential to maintain at least a connection with the land of Israel, if not a connection with the state of Israel. So one could make a difference between the land of Israel and the state of Israel. That always Jerusalem, praying to Jerusalem 3 times a day, always orienting ourselves in that direction, thinking about historically what the land of Israel has meant for the people, that could be enough, at least, of a connection that people should have with Israel. That you should at least have a connection with that historic idea and the idealized idea of what Israel is. But I would also argue that we need to have a connection with the state of Israel. And I know that that is fraught with a lot of political feelings today within the American Jewish community. But I feel very strongly that we need to have this connection with the state of Israel. And if people disagree with the policies of the state of Israel, then we need to argue and advocate for what we think the appropriate policies should be. And we should help those in Israel who are fighting for those very same ideas. I think that because of the ancient triangle that is Judaism, you can't discount any point of the Torah, of the triangle, for any reason. We could have reasons to be upset with God and have a theological crisis, but that doesn't mean that we should become an atheist in order to respond to our problems with God. We don't give up on God because we have a problem with God. We need to work on our understanding of God and our relationship with God in order to ensure that who we are as Jews is maintained. We could have a problem with Torah as well. The conservative movement has people on all degrees of the spectrum of observance, from people who are very observant, strictly observant of Shabbat and keeping kosher, etc., to those who don't at all. And all are within the conservative movement because all recognize how important a place Torah has in one's life. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're fully observant of Torah and each and every single one of the mitzvot, but it means that we understand and accept the idea that Torah is supposed to be an important part of our life. So just as we may have a problem with God, but we're not giving up on God and throwing that out of the triangle. Just as we might have issues with Torah in our personal observance, doesn't mean that we throw Torah out. Same is true with our understanding of Israel. Somebody's at the door, and I'm the only one in the building today, so hold on 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. And those watching the recording, I apologize for just running out like that. I don't have better ways of editing the recording. Um, so uh, so again, the triangle, the points of the triangle are important points of the triangle, and that though an argument can be made for this so-called diasporism movement, I would say that I disagree with that movement, and that we need to maintain a connection to Israel. So, any further questions, comments, thoughts that people wanted to ask or to share about this? Okay, so that's what I wanted to share today about that article. I hope people stay safe in the snow, and so Bob has this in the chat
Yeah, I looked at
that you found that from the Pew.
yes.
Okay, so 1/4 of U.S. Jews have lived in Israel or been there more than once. Just under half of U.S. Jewish adults have been to Israel. Okay, that's great. Far more Jews by religion than Jews of no religion have visited or lived in Israel. Roughly 8 in 10 Orthodox Jews have been to Israel. Okay. Excellent. So that's a pretty large percentage of the American Jewish community has been there. So I wonder, though, among this diasporism movement, how many of them have been to Israel? That would be interesting to know.
I'm not sure you answered my question.
About how to
That
respond to a connection to Israel.
yeah.
Oh, right. That it might reflect dual loyalty. Right. Well, I mean, President Trump had that argument as well. Yeah, when he spoke to Jews in Florida once and said, "Your prime minister, Netanyahu." Right. And so clearly, there are some in America who think that Jews in America are really Israeli and not fully American. And you know, those uneducated, which there are a lot of people who are on social media, are clearly not educated and just follow the conspiracy theories. The uneducated see that that Jews clearly only care about Israel. But look, you might be able to say the same argument to Irish Americans. A lot of Irish Americans do travel back to Ireland to visit the home country and have a connection with family that's still in Ireland. It doesn't necessarily mean that their loyalty is to Ireland. You could say the same about Latin Americans. They feel what they may about why they had to leave their Latin American country, but they're still devoted to, especially when the World Cup soccer tournament comes around, people are rabidly supportive of their country of origin in that tournament. So so yeah, we love Israel, but we love America too. and there would be obviously no problem for us to serve in the American army and die for our country, as Jews have done for 200 years, and to serve in the government as a loyal servant of America. So, you know, so if it it's not hard for me to make the argument that we do not have a primary loyalty to Israel, and there's nothing wrong with having a love and affection for another country that mostly could be a spiritual affection as opposed to primary political affection. All right, so clearly I love Israel. It's my spiritual love is for Israel, but I uh, I thank God that I'm an American citizen as well.
Yeah, I realize we don't have the answers, but nobody is accusing an Irish American or Italian American of being for Ireland or Italy. It comes down to the Jews. And this has
Okay,
been
what's
our
up?
problem for years, for
Right, and we're
centuries.
not going to solve the problem of anti-Semitism. It'll never go away, and so it's just so yeah. So we know as Jews that we can answer all of these attacks, but it does. However, we answer them, it hasn't helped, and more attacks and creative, bizarre attacks like we have with the Jews. Built a laser that's in outer space that was shooting onto California, causing the forest fires a couple of summers ago. So the craziness of anti-Semitism shows no bounds, and will never go away. All right, so we'll stop here for today. Have a good rest of the day, everybody, and like I said, stay warm and safe.